Peace be with you. Dear friends, welcome to Living Flame Podcast website and Facebook group. Gospel Reflections for the Feast Day of Saint Stephen. We are in the Octave of Christmas and we have these beautiful readings. First reading taken from the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 6, verses 8 to 10 and chapter 7, verses 54 to 59. Stephen, full of grace and power, did great wonders and signs among the people. So he was one of the disciples of Christ who was filled with that enthusiasm of proclaiming and teaching the kingdom of God to the people who were eagerly listening. But then there were people who were envious and perhaps were against these folks. And consequently, the reading says, some of those who belonged to the synagogue of the freedmen, as it was called, Cyrenians, Alexandrians, and others of those from Cilicia and Asia, stood up and argued with Stephen, but they could not withstand the wisdom and the spirit with which Stephen spoke. That was actually the situation of the early Christians and especially the followers of Christ and disciples who had that tremendous power and enthusiasm. No one could withstand their wisdom, their understanding, how they were able to convince people. But there were other people who were opposing and they were perhaps even jealous, and consequently they wanted to persecute them. And we see in the gospel passage chapter 10 of Matthew, verses 17 to 22, we find how Jesus said to the 12, beware of those who oppose you, for they will hand you over to the councils and flog you in their synagogues, and you will be dragged before governors and kings because of me, as a testimony to them and the Gentiles. When they hand you over, do not worry about how you are to speak or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you at the time. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Dear friends, what a gospel passage here when we celebrate the octave of Christmas. Just we finished celebrating Christmas, the birth of Christ, but the joy continues. And in this joy we have the celebration of Saint Stephen, meaning to say that Christians will be always persecuted. Babe Jesus was persecuted, and that is why when King Herod wanted to eliminate him, the angel appeared to Joseph and asked him to leave for Egypt. And therefore, Joseph takes Mary and babe Jesus and goes to Egypt and settles himself there until Herod dies. And then he was told to come back to Nazareth. Dear friends, what we understand is in our own situation, we will undergo sufferings and pains and sorrows. Of course, when we look at people in the Middle East today, how Christians are persecuted, and in many other countries, Christians are persecuted for their faith. They do not have their freedom to practice their religion. But then we need to pray for them, and we need to carry our daily crosses after the example of Saint Stephen. We need to accept our difficult moments, situations, and crosses. We may not be persecuted like the early Christians were persecuted wherever we may be, but then we will have our own pains and sorrows, difficult moments. If we can carry our daily crosses, as Jesus himself very clearly said, if you want to be my disciple, you should take up your daily cross and follow me. Let us ask the Lord for this grace as we celebrate the feast of Saint Stephen, that we may be empowered and strengthened to follow Christ in our daily lives. God bless you.